All right. Here we are with what might be our last office hours of the semester, or stream for the semester. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. See what happens.
Yeah.
See what pops up in the news. There's a lot of stuff going on, man.
Right.
Wait, and the president is speaking tonight about Venezuela. Is that what I heard?
Jeff, is that?
Yeah, I just saw the update right before we went live. He's going to address the nation tonight, reportedly about announcing a war with Venezuela.
Okay.
But in brighter news, Get Some J just became a Tier 1 member. So welcome to the membership, bro.
Get Some J. Wait, does J, does that mean Get Some J?
We don't know.
Get Some J. Are you in a decriminalized?
No, he's
in Colorado or California or somewhere.
In Texas, actually.
Oh, Texas. Okay, well then that doesn't have the same meaning in Texas. Well, it might be like, yeah, I travel to Colorado once a month to get some J.
Get some J. I was thinking OJ, but
yeah.
All
right, hang on. All right, so hang on. Let's look at. Hey, by the way, we have a couple of things we're going to talk about, but in the meantime, it'd be really nice if we can also just respond to things from the stream because we don't have that much. So, Ziesendorf, get some Full Metal Jacket J, my name. All right, okay, all right. So Ziesendorf says, I truly wonder if there is such a thing as a bridge too far for you. I found Trump's tweet about Rob Reiner the lowest. Yeah, that's a bridge too far, man, for sure. That was like, there are actually quite a number of bridges. There's so many of them, actually. I mean, I don't know, Elijah, what you would say, but I think I'm inherently a respectful person. And, I think I get because I work with students and I do it in such large groups, like you can't be disrespectful to students to young people, right? In the kind of the world that I'm at, because you just can't be, because it's just a bad idea. And so I can have all my private thoughts, and Julie and we have lots of very forthcoming conversations about things that, the students do and so on. But I think I've just trained myself in public settings to be respectful inherently, right? So, so therefore, there are a lot of bridges that are too far. But that one about that Trump crossed over, yeah, that's terrible, man. Like, come on. Yeah, that's
so like bridge that are too far, as in crossing the line.
Yeah, that was just so mean. It's just so stupid. Like, come on, man. Why would you say that? And like, this is part of the issue here, right? Like, we as a nation, in some ways, have lowered us. We've moved away from there. There's like, what do you say? There's just certain ways of being in the world that I think are important. Like, so people could say the fact that I teach in jeans and I don't have a shirt out and I have my shirt hanging out, like I should be wearing a suit and a tie, that's just part that comes with the role of being a professor. So somebody could say that. And that's fine.
Right.
So I have some places, where I'm quite willing to kind of stretch things and relax a little bit. But my God, if I were the president, if I were the leader of a nation, man, I can't even imagine saying stuff like that. And yeah, it's just terrible. It's just so bad. And it's a bad message to people in the nation, right? I mean, it's such a terrible message.
Yeah, there was this is a little different, kind of related, but in the grad course that I was in for RJI. There was a reading that focused on the word literacy, and not literacy as, like being able to read and write, but literacy as in knowing the norms of something, or like ways to be, or like, for example, like a facilitator is a certain form of literacy. Like there's certain things you have to know about a facilitator and this and that in order to be it, or the literacy of a professor, literacy of, and I don't know, ever since I've learned that, I've just been thinking about it, and I don't know if it has any meaning, but just the idea of Trump's literacy, or like
Hmm.
he's stepping into being a president, and that already has its certain literacy that people are norms that you're supposed to step into being that, and it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
he's
And
not.
if he's not, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's just not in that place of it's like he's creating a new literacy or for it, or like not creating a new one, but just very outside of the
Mm.
norms and standards of how you're supposed to be a president in certain ways, and like diplomatic, or like diplomatic language, and
Yeah. Yeah. There's
um,
a certain type of diplomacy for sure that which obviously, if you think about the way I am, language that I use in this space as a professor, like I'm pretty informal. So you could really easily critique me for being informal, but I'm not vulgar and I'm not mean and I'm not, if anything, what I'm modeling for people is a certain amount of informality, but I'm also modeling and people could say that's immature. Like you can make that argument, but
yeah, people could make any argument, I guess, right?
yeah, but but it's just not. I don't know, man. It's you just. I don't know. I think it's basically telling the vulgarity. I think of it, and vulgarity is not just swearing. It's just vulgarity. It's just the kind of layers of speech that's mean
Right.
spirited. And yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway, we
It's like
really
a presence. Yeah.
yeah, we can't. We really can't
Intention.
afford that, man. Like we don't need that. We don't need more of that. We have too. Yeah, it's just quite troubling, man. Kind of where we're at. So we don't want that.
What do you,
Um,
yeah, and what are you thinking about in terms of like the effects of that, like the long-term effects, or the way people are reacting to like this vulgarity, and
and
um,
lack of decorum, right? So Jeff's saying there's the lack of decorum, and
can you
again,
say
I
what
don't.
that means too?
Well, like there's a certain set of norms that are rooted in history. This is how I would see it, right? That are rooted in history. There's a kind of an agreement on how you should dress and how you should speak and walk and act and
The
these
literacy,
kinds
yeah,
of
yeah,
things, right? The things you
right,
should do, how you should treat one another. It's kind of interesting. Like in Korea, there's so much decorum, and I mean, it's like, if a student comes up to the front of the room to greet me, the student will do a quick bow kind of thing, and I'll
right,
bow to the student. And
hmm,
these kinds of things, right? You bow to people on the street, you bow to people, you bow
right,
in your workplace, you walk into a room and you do a bow. And I mean, to a different office, wherever you're working, and you bow,
hmm,
and it's not a.
hmm,
Because sometimes if it's not a formal setting, the bow will be fairly fast. People don't
right,
do it all the time, but definitely in formal settings they do. Man, that's just serious.
right,
It's just so much
hmm.
decorum, and it feels good. It feels very respectful. It feels like
Okay. You feel connected.
you feel
So,
connected.
and
Yeah.
within the structure that certain decorum is creating, which is supposed to be like respect and valuing each other in the moment, like seeing each other. Maybe if it's like, is this the case of it being like you said, you're a professor and it's a student, and
Yeah.
they're showing respect to you?
Yeah, I
Um,
would say that. Yeah. And like, you know,
And are
I
you
think
saying
it's
that
the respect. I think the
that
respect
America
is the.
has?
But again, listen. Well, I really want to emphasize, people, especially a lot of older people who watch my class, feel like I'm disrespectful because of how I dress. I will refer to students as bro and dude and that kind of stuff, and that, hey, you shouldn't do that. You're a professor. So I recognize that I'm also part of dropping a certain decorum, right? Or it kind
Right.
of withering away or fading away a little bit. And
Mhm.
the difference, I think, is this. Well, that's why I don't come out. First off, let me just say that's why I don't come out so harshly, because I
Yep.
recognize I do it.
Yep. Mhm.
For me, it's just that it's 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 not vulgar in a way. It's not mean. I'm not mean in that kind of way. So,
Mhm.
but again,
Yeah.
it's a slippery slope, right? Like, who's to say? I don't know, man.
Mhm. And so are you saying, like, even though the decorum isn't exactly, at times people would say professor-like, you still maintain a certain value of like respecting others, which is similar to the decorum that you're saying like over in Korea. Like there's even though their
Yeah,
decorum is very formal, like they're
yeah,
holding a little more of that formality you're saying than you are. They're also holding that value of like respect or
yes.
and it seems
But
like that's the piece that's you're saying
that's
the
that's the
West is
key. Well, we're
not the
not
West, but
U.S. Yeah,
America.
we're
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
And when I'm there, I really like it, man. I so appreciate it. I feel like you. Um, yeah, it's so nice to bow, man. It is such a beautiful, it's such a nice gesture.
Mhm,
And when someone bows to me and I bow to them, and it's such a, when I stand up, I would start class, you start class and
mhm.
I'd walk up in front I'd walk out, say, okay, we're going to start. And I would bow. No, you wouldn't, not
There's
everybody does that every time. Right.
mhm,
But definitely every time I give a talk, the first thing I do, I walk up on stage, I turn around and I bow. And if it's a big room, like, a few weeks ago, I spoke in a room that was quite wide, right? It wasn't very deep, but it was very wide. I bowed 4 times, here, 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 right? To make
mhm.
sure that everybody felt like I was really engaging with them.
So, do you feel like there's a more off like, are you saying I don't know, this is what I'm hearing, like, are you saying there's a more authentic, um, valuing of people or there's a more authentic intentionality, um,
Well,
like the
it's
intentionality of
yeah.
that decorum, which
Yeah,
is
that's
to
really interesting. Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, maybe
I
so.
don't know,
Maybe that's yeah, no, I think it is. I think here, and listen, we have it in lots of situations here. I mean, go to a church, like you'll see there's decorum, right?
Mhm,
You go to a Catholic church. I mean, obviously the people they're very well versed in how to be during a mass. You go to mass,
yeah,
the congregation, the officiant, the priest, the
mhm,
people who are participating. There are the standard actions that you go through, and
mhm,
it's nice actually. It feels really good. I enjoy
mhm.
going to mass,
And so
and when I
you're speaking to the decorum that you see here in in the
yeah,
US.
the loose stuff, and then modeled by the person at the very top, who's just it's just vulgar in so many ways, but doesn't have to be. That's part of the problem, right?
Mhm,
Because I've heard him not be like that. I've heard him be very thoughtful and slow and really responding carefully to questions and not being a jerk. And he's really very thoughtful, like it doesn't have to be that way. But again, I'm in lots of situations where I don't call people dude and bro, like that's what it is. So like, I know not very many though, I got to tell you, it's like,
uh-huh,
so that's part of also a thing for me. But
mm,
part of it,
yeah,
for me is just surviving, man. I to me, the way that I can do what I do is to bring, there's a porous nature between my everyday life and my public life. And that porous nature, meaning that my actions, when I'm in my private space and then I walk out into a public space, it's not very different. And that allows me to deal with the stresses and the difficulties of A, being a public figure, and B, talking about and addressing the kinds of things that, I'm addressing day in and day out.
Is
man.
that something new for like stepping out into your home or being in your home and then stepping out into the world and it not being very different? Has it always been like that? Was there a point where something happened where that started to be the case, or
Yeah, I think it was after I started teaching larger classes for a bit, and what I realized was I've always been fairly informal in my teaching. I didn't dress up, and I didn't, these kinds of things, right? But my mentors, who I kind of modeled my role as a professor, after whom I modeled my role as a professor, they were pretty formal. My first mentor, he's my intellectual mentor, at every level wore a suit and tie every class, man. You never saw him not.
were you informal to him, or
Was I
like
what?
were you did you show up in front of him formal or informal? And
I showed up as myself, but when I was with him, I got a little more formal because he was formal. Now, mind you, that's so. But let me go back to your other question about when I started teaching the larger groups of people over time, and it didn't take very long. I realized, you know what, I can't do this two worlds thing. I can't walk into this world, start a class, and shift up how I'm seeing things. It's not going to work for me because the issues were too volatile, and because I've always been teaching about these kinds of issues, right? After my first semester, basically, of teaching, it's just been this. So it's just so incredibly difficult.
So if you could say when you were like, would you be able to name, if you could, if it's possible, like what you were shifting between? Like
That's a really good question. Yeah, it was the idea of what I should and should not say. Like, there's a topic of the class, there's a subject matter, and let me talk about the subject matter as the subject matter. Let me not talk about my own thoughts and this kind of thing because, I have lots of thoughts, but let me not do that. They'll get mixed up because let me try to just present the topic at hand and not, and when I'm going to talk about what I think, then I step into that. I say, okay, well, here are my thoughts, right? This is what I'm thinking. This was back when I was obviously giving lots more information.
Right.
So
the you that was inside the home at the time, like when you were shifting, it was, well, let me get my question.
not the home,
Not the home, but like,
the classroom.
I guess the analogy when you were saying, like when I would step out into the world, there wouldn't be much. I'm porous from being in my home to, and I was like,
and it was okay. So there have been two stages, right? One is when I kind of started to make a shift in the lecture hall, but back then it was 250 to 300 students kind of thing, right? But that's when I first started to make a shift to say, it's just going to be a lot easier if I just kind of bring myself in,
okay,
and don't worry about,
because before you would just teach what you were supposed to. You wouldn't really introduce your thoughts, and it was so hard to like to be so positioned, or
and I would talk about my own personal thoughts, but I would make a distinction in the moment. Well, now, of course, I don't say a lot of my own personal thoughts. I some, but but in any case, but then there became a time.
This is so interesting. We were like talking about your pedagogy, in a
Yeah,
way, like
yeah.
of how
Yeah. It's
that's it
but
sounds like.
yeah, and the point being, and I think that this is true. I don't know. I don't know enough people who uh I don't know enough people who are kind of public scholars who have cameras in front of them a lot. There's a
Mhm.
there's something different when you turn that camera on. And like for me, and I especially see this, when I'm doing media things, when it, wh- it, whether it's here in the United States or in some other
Mhm.
nation, right?
Right.
The camera comes on and it's just like uh, I can go to that space where I just start compartmentalizing everything. I'm just looking right at the camera or the interviewer or whatever, and I'm in a different man. I just call my I
It's
just sort my thoughts very clearly before I start talking.
right.
And so I
Mhm.
can do that, and I do that. I just don't do it in Social 119. Yeah, because I
Mm.
can't. I can't do that like as much as I need to because too much is up in the air. It's all ad lib. I don't know where things are going to go. I mean, I have some idea. When I'm being interviewed on, on a for
Mhm.
media, some sort of media, whatever it is.
Yep.
When I'm being interviewed, I, I, I just I'm it's like it's like my
Mhm.
thoughts and my words coming out they're just fused together like that. There's no
Mm.
separation, my thoughts just I
Right.
see it organized in my head and I speak it, and I'm not even thinking,
Mhm.
it's just coming.
Right,
Once I
right,
get it
right.
organized, like I'll put an outline together and then I say it,
Okay.
but
Uh-huh.
that's not
Uh-huh.
in 119. I can't do that. Yeah, I can't do
And
that.
then, so wait, is that the being interviewed different than like the show in Korea or like a talk in Korea? Or
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
that's
talking Korea is
that's the
that's a
same thing.
different thing. Then that's a different thing. Then that's a talk. But the interview is when the cameras are really on. It's like,
Mhm.
man, and you don't know where it's going to be, right? You don't know where something's going to end up or
Right.
how far
And
it's going to. It's crazy, man. I mean, it's really crazy. I was talking to my friend. I have I my my creative director in Korea. She and I had a meeting last night, and she said,
Mhm.
"Hey, did you say something about a Genesis car?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I did actually last week, a week ago, last Tuesday." And she said, "Yeah, because there are all these videos up in Korea about you." And I said, "Oh my god, oh my god!" Right? I'm like, "What they say?" And they said they're saying like, "Well, he's." What I said was for the first time. Remember, I don't know if you weren't in class Tuesday, right? You weren't there, or did you
no,
watch it? Yeah.
I didn't see a class.
Jeff will remember that it was. I was talking to students, and I said to the one student, we were talking about dreams. What do you dream? And I was saying, yeah, I don't really dream, but I don't have dreams. I don't have desires. I don't have dreams. I just live. And but I recently had a desire. Like I dreamed of something. I had a really strong desire, and I went, oh my god. And then he didn't ask me what it was, it just kind of went on. And then he was about ready to get off the table. And I said, "Hey, wait, do you want to ask me what my desire was?" I just threw it out there just on a whim. And he said, "Oh yeah, what's your desire?" And I said, "I want to get a Genesis car. Next year is like a 2026 or 2027. Genesis coming out with this car that has the doors open like a like a Rolls Royce like that. I don't know how to do that with my hand. How do you do it? Oh, like this, like this. So here's the car. The doors open like that. So it's the front and
Interesting.
the back seat, so the doors close, you know?
That's bad.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I want one of those cars. Dude, I haven't, I've owned, Lori and I, so, 2 years ago, we got a car, right? We bought a new
Mhm.
car. It's the first one we ever got, right? Our cars since I got my first car when I was 15, Lori got hers when she was 16. We totaled up the total cost of all the cars we've ever owned, and it came to $28,000 or $29,000. That's how much we spent on cars our entire life. That's it, man.
That's amazing.
28 or 20. Yeah, like
Pretty good.
yeah, no, we don't do that. Like we don't live
Uh-huh.
like that. We don't dream.
So like
we
this
don't
is the
buy
moment.
things. So 2 years ago, I got this car, and I was like, "Damn, this is really nice." You know, we waited till like we're at the end of our life. We bought a brand new car off the lot, and then like we bought it, and then I get this thing. You know, a year and a half later, like, "Hey, if you want to trade your car in, here's how much it's worth." And the value had decreased by 40%. I'm like, "I've only owned the car. It had 7,000 miles on it. We've only owned it for a year and a half." 7,000 miles. It depreciated by 40%. I'm like, the fuck? Come on, man. No wonder it's a really bad idea to buy new cars, man. No wonder I didn't do it, right? 29,000 in like 40 years of car purchasing, over 40 years for Lori, and over 40 years for Lori and over 40 years for me. We spent 28, and I think it was 28,500 on cars.
Wow. Yeah. Go to you for shopping advice for cars.
Dude, yeah, you don't go to me, man, because I just whatever. We don't, it just, I mean, that's how we live our lives, right? We're not really that. So, okay,
Right.
but I want one of these cars, right? One of these Genesis cars. I don't know why, I just do. I don't want anything else. I want nothing else. I just want this car. But it's a lot of money, man. It's not a Rolls Royce, obviously. It's not that much money. But,
And
the door's open that way. Genesis is the upscale Hyundai. You know, like Acura is the upscale Honda.
Got it.
That kind of thing. So it's the premier line of Hyundai cars. So
I actually want to look it up. I wonder if Jeff put it on the stream.
So listen, man, here's the point. Somebody, so in Korea, someone grabbed that and they ran with it. They're like, oh my God, the professor wants a Genesis car.
That's hilarious.
So anyway, the point being, you gotta be
listen. I think that Sam, Elijah, and I want Genesis cars, and if anybody in Korea wants to make that happen, all I'm going to say is, I love
3 of them. Right?
Yeah, 3 of them. I'll even take the smallest one. If you want to give us one that's not hybrid, I'll take it. I don't care.
Yeah, I'll take it. I love Genesis cars. I love them. They're my favorite. I had a poster of it when I was a child. I love Genesis.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, that's the thing. So,
but like the overarching point is like you were speaking about Trump, and you were, you were speaking about tact, and you were relating that to your own life. You know, or places you have to be tactful, or compartmentalized, or read the room. You know, and use the literacy in accordance to the norms of the place that you're in.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we all need to do that at some level. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I mean, we all really need to do that. So, but I mean, this is the thing. We're going to pay for it if we don't. You know, when people go too far, we pay for it. And it's just not good. You know, like, for example, I love watching Parliament in England, right?
Okay.
In the UK, you sort of watch the Parliament and you watch how they talk to one another, and they debate one another, and they will do the most vicious criticisms of one another, but they're really funny. They'll eviscerate one another with humor. And then they're all making it's just such a
humor.
With humor, dude, with humor and intellect at the same time. And so, but it's all decorum. You know what I mean? Once in a while, things get out of hand because people will be yelling like, "Oh," and there's a lot of noise, but eventually it quiets down. And so, it's
so that banter, that form of debate is a decorum for them.
Yeah. Have you ever watched it? Just pull up YouTube video
No, I haven't.
of Parliament. Yeah, just watch for a while. It's a really it's so entertaining.
Interesting.
It is absolutely so entertaining.
I'm gonna type it in now, actually, just so I have it.
But same, in the U.S., Congress can be very when people, when people are really speaking to one another and they're not just posturing, but they're truly speaking,
And
not
when you
just
say when you say posturing, you mean
meaning that they're not trying to say anything of interest to their
it's just a script?
opponents. They're
It's
just speaking to try to do whatever they're trying to do, just garner favor with somebody. I have no idea. But when they're truly,
Mhm.
debating, it really is up in the air, like how people are going to vote on something, and what you
Right.
say may actually have an impact
Mhm.
on somebody, and
Right.
then people in our can
Yeah,
be
what's the
very
decorum of that
smart.
yeah, what have you observed of that decorum? I
Well, it's
mean
very similar, people, they
mhm,
talk and they see, well, the gentleman from Louisiana, you have 5 minutes, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the time and my fellow, da 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 da. And then they
mhm,
talk, and it's cool. And especially when they're
yeah.
not really reading something, can be very powerful.
Do
But you slide into something that's just can be kind of nasty sometimes. And yeah.
is there the same amount of humor that you would say in
Sometimes,
the
but not
parliament?
like in the UK, man. The UK is
Yeah,
different. Yeah, it's
yeah.
just different.
Would you say that has an impact on, like, the difference in outcome? Is, like, the
Yeah.
amount of use of humor versus it not being there, or do you think that's
Well,
kind of
I think it has an impact on the population. I think, we have a much more informal culture here in the United States. And, it's not an old culture. We now have the parliament system. We don't have it's a little bit different, but I appreciate the informality that we have. I mean, that's fine.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
uh,
Okay,
I remember, when I remember being in a school, grades, public couple public schools in Haiti. I mean, even people are just, really poor, but a certain, students at their desks, students wearing uniforms that many couldn't afford. I mean, they were different things, but like, yeah, I don't know. There's just something about that. I don't know. I
mm,
can't really free.
just in
All right,
Haiti
man.
in these schools, you're right, right, right.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Mhm, right.
Um, well, and AZ just said the thing about, I find Trump's lack of a filter amusing and refreshing. Well, that's the point. It can be amusing and it can be refreshing, but sometimes, as this issue the other day with uh, the Reiners, it just so clearly is over the is 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 mean and vulgar and dumb, like really just dumb. So yeah, that yeah. So that's kind of the thing, man. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, yeah. And I think that's the I think
huh,
that's the point of it. Just don't you have a responsibility to not
okay.
whip people into a frenzy. And
And the
we have enough
right.
violence right now. We don't need to be doing that.
Mhm, mhm.
So and
And,
mental potential to spiral into greater violence. We don't need to be doing that. So yeah.
and really quick, I just wanted to clarify, when you answered the question I asked earlier, you answered it differently than what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if you interpret it in the same way I was in how I was asking it. I was wondering if, like, the difference in humor that's involved in the small groups of, like, parliament, or, like, like
Uh-huh.
the groups of parliament, the way that they use humor, as
Yeah.
a embedded into the way they converse
Yeah.
and
Yeah, yeah,
debate,
yeah.
and the lack there, and you're saying it's there in, our system, but there's a lack thereof. I wonder if, because, like, in A Failure to Nerve, the book that, by Edwin Friedman, really interesting. He talks about humor and, like, its role in, like, softening edges in conversation and maybe getting through conflict. And I just wonder if,
Mhm.
like, the differences in use in how we use humor as a tool to, like, get through
Mm.
conflict, or um, to maybe be more authentic and to be more real
Yeah.
and code it with humor,
Yeah.
instead
Yeah,
people
yeah,
that
yeah.
don't use humor and they're not as real and they'd rather just be politically correct because they don't have anything to curb the rawness of the truth that they want to say. But
Yeah.
it sounds like you're saying in the parliament they're able to use humor and also be like intellectual and real, like really give,
Yeah.
and the humor can curb the edge that might be, I don't know. And I was wondering if like
That's interesting. Well, here I think about like comedians, right? Stand-up comedians. Now,
right.
there are a few out there. There's a couple really popular now who never swear, right? That's just not. It's just not part of their. They don't use any vulgarity or curse words, right? And it's quite notable actually. Although you don't when they're speaking, when they're doing their thing, you don't necessarily notice, but there's something about them, right? You don't need to swear, but at the same time, I mean, if you're really a good comedian, you don't need to do that. I mean, come on, you go back and look at the comedians of the 60s and 70s and so on, where you just didn't do. You don't need that if you're
Mhm.
truly funny. But a few well placed 4-letter words or whatever can be really funny in the right moment, right?
Mhm.
And but there's a line that you cross over where it's just too much. There's some comedians just swear way too much, man. It's unnecessarily, it's gratuitous. It ceases to be funny, really.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it's just like, yeah, come on, man. Like, see, you need to like cut that out, right? For
Mhm.
me, what's interesting is that in once in a while in class, I'll drop. I don't very often, but once in a while I'll drop an F bomb or something, and
Mhm.
but sometimes I'll do it in a humorous way. That if I were on stage, right, like students can't make that adjustment very well. Like that. Oh, so wait, he's just going to do like 20 seconds of stand up here. So
Right.
therefore, I can listen to it and I can follow it, and that's cool. Um,
Mhm.
but they don't
Mhm.
do that, and so if I
Right.
sometimes it's just I'm met with silence, and I'm realizing, okay, but what I just said there is actually really funny, and I know it's funny because I've said it maybe something similar somewhere else
Yeah,
over
yeah,
and over,
right.
right? So
Mhm.
it's but student, it's hard to make the adjustment. Some things I say are not funny at
Right.
all, but I mean,
What they
they're
have.
dad joke type things. I think they're funny, but
Mhm.
you know.
And do they, that's so interesting. It's like, what do they have the permission? Like, do they feel the permission to, like, within the context that they're in? Um, there's certain things, yeah, that they feel like they can respond to or can't,
Yeah,
or
I don't
like
know.
for
I think
other,
maybe
who
they're
knows?
just not expecting it, or maybe they're not even listening. But last summer, I had this class when I was teaching my class, and I had these students. I had 3 students. I later found out that they all had dads who told dad jokes, kind of right, but they found it really funny. Dude, they got it. They got my humor, and I'm like, okay, it was a small group of people. It was like 50 people or 60 people, and which is interesting in itself for me to be able to spend a couple hours just talking to 50 or 60 people, young
Right.
people, right?
So much more intimate, yeah.
But
Mhm.
they just got like, I just slid into stand up. I was just doing stand up, right? And they got it. And then the more they laughed, the more they, they brought it out in me. And then I could
Mhm.
just, then more people started laughing because they got it. And I later found out, I guess it was 2 of them really had dads that really, they had fathers who had my kind of sense of humor, and then I
Uh-huh.
was able to really roll with it and play,
Yeah.
and then I was, that was a lot of fun. But
Oh,
mostly I don't do that.
yeah,
You know,
you were riding that wave. That's what it sounds like.
riding the wave, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah. Well, Tristan Mike, by the way, currently there are quite a number of comedians who don't swear at all, which is interesting. One guy is really popular. I've seen him. He's done a few Netflix specials and stuff. I don't know what his name is, but I think you have like George Carlin, and there's a few who don't. But um, yeah, it's kind of work with Hedberg's. Yeah, Mitch Hedberg. Yeah, what an interesting guy, man. when I did, I was telling you when that I opened one time at a comedy club for Richard Lewis. That was kind of the high point. I actually had a good routine then. It was fairly, I actually, it was the one time when I think I was pretty funny, but
Okay. Yeah, you had a.
he
How
was a
long was it?
really
Was it?
interesting guy, man. So neurotic. Cause you talk to these guys, these comedians, man, you talk to them before and afterwards and they're all just in their own space. Like, they're like everybody else,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
really,
yeah.
fairly, really funny guy. God.
When you say neurotic, was that like, was he, like, what did that look
Just
like?
like he is on, well, he died recently, but he was on Curb Your Enthusiasm for a lot.
Okay.
Another guy who was on Seinfeld, who was a friend of Jerry Seinfeld's, I opened for him also.
Who?
Dominic Herrera. Yeah. He was a really funny guy. But yeah. But yeah, just neurotic and it's like just like, oh, I got cancer, like I can feel it, I know, like I get, this kind of stuff, just like really hilarious. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so funny.
Anyway, that was my highlight. That was my moment right there, man. You know what I mean? It's all
Yeah.
just been a struggle to keep from falling downhill ever since then.
That's cool.
All right, man. So
Yeah.
what else do we have? Matt Matt Rife. I think Matt Rife is the guy. I think he is the one guy who doesn't swear at all. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Robin Williams didn't swear, man. I told you the other day, I did a set. I was at a club with Robin Williams' roommate back in the day. This was in the
Yeah.
80s, man. Yeah. He said he was crazy. 24/7, man. He said he was the worst roommate in the world because he never turned off, man. He just like never got a moment. Couldn't even get a breath out, So see if you're a comedian, right? Like for Robin Williams would be so intimidating. Yeah.
I wonder what that was like.
I found Get Some J, by the way. A lot of my stand-up was really rooted in sociology. A lot of things that I did. Yeah, Jim Gaffigan doesn't swear. Yeah, he doesn't either. He's pretty. I mean, a lot of people don't, but again, but some do, man. I remember some go through periods where they're just like, dude, that's just too much, man. You're just too much. You really even, yeah. But anyway, I at the same time, I've read enough about people who study swearing, and it's really a fascinating exploration. Not just a psychological one, but a sociological one. And yeah, it's so interesting, man.
What did they tell you? Or like, what are some just pieces of info?
Well, like the intellect, right? The different things that go along with swearing and what it means for how people think, and swearing and innovation. People who are really, I think my recollection is really highly innovative people will often swear, or we see it again. You have these big populations of people, but it's not linked necessarily to it's not linked to a degrading of intellect, but actually for certain types of people, it's actually an indication, a mark of excessive or expanded intellect.
Wow.
Yeah, McWhorter had this book on swearing that was John McWhorter, really interesting guy. John McWhorter's an interesting guy. Yeah, I didn't read his book, but I read some essays from that. Yeah, really, really interesting dude. Okay,
he's a linguist.
Yeah, he's a linguist. He was a columnist for the New York Times for a while. Conservative. He's fairly conservative. And
It says
yeah,
it says he's an associate professor at Columbia right now, a
yeah,
professor of linguistics at Columbia University.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow, that's cool.
Yeah, really clear, very, very clear thing. I have not heard anything from him. And for 5 or 10 years,
Wow.
I really heard a lot from him, and it feels like maybe I mean, he's out there. I just haven't crossed paths with what he's talking about and thinking about it. Maybe it's like a lot of
Yeah,
folks, you just kind of get tired. Like sometimes I think, man, I could just appreciate just
he
just crawling into a hole and being done. Yeah.
he's got a book on, it's called Woke Racism,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
a
that
new
came out
religion
about
has,
5 years ago or so, right?
yep, yeah, 2021.
I didn't know Dave Chappelle's parents were professors. Ah, that's interesting. Yeah, that would make sense because he's definitely like a really and the layering of his thinking is beyond complex.
What's his
Oh,
name?
he's doing the blog with Glenn Lowry. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. You know what? I did see that. I did watch that. That's right. And they're talking like once a week or so. And the way they're talking is that is McWhorter. Okay. The way they're talking requires preparation. They're not just like turning the camera on like we are right here and just talking. And so, yeah, that would take a lot. Glenn Lowry. These are
Mm.
interesting people.
Oh, he's an economist and
Yeah, Glenn Lowry. Well, he's
an
kind of a
academic.
sociologist, economist, but um,
Oh, professor of social sciences at Brown University.
yeah, just a thinker. Just a thinker. Yeah, yeah, that's all it is. All right, man. Listen, so uh, maybe we'll just anyway. What do you got? So we finished our class
Oh yeah,
at the prison. It's
yeah,
good.
yeah.
How was that for you, by the way, overall?
Overall, it was really cool. It gave me an opportunity to continue to do what I'm doing here,
Hmm.
our world in conversation, and um, step into a different setting and continue to use those skills, which was helpful. Like in my presentation, some reflections I had was I was able to step into my expertise. Um, which is something that I'm still can like expertise, right? Like I'm learning this method. I'm learning how to be a facilitator. To some level, like I usually reject my expertise. Like I don't usually say I do. I usually am just like I'm a pupil of this work. I'm still learning. You know what I mean? I'm a student of the work, and that's usually how I'm navigating or I'm thinking.
Hmm.
And so to actually have to be a teacher where they're like expecting me to tell them things, and
Yeah, yeah.
at certain moments. And so that was something that's still new for me in ways. And
Hmm.
so I had the
Hey,
opportunity. Yeah.
let me ask you this: what did you learn about um, the incarcerated population by being there, by working in there for a semester?
Mm, yeah. One thing I learned is they definitely do not have anywhere close to the resources that they need um,
Or they could benefit from in some
to
way.
benefit from.
We would
Yeah.
all
And
benefit from actually, because yeah, yeah.
right. And say, yeah, you can say more on that if you want when you
Well,
say.
just because most people are going to get out, right? I mean, that's the thing. We
Right.
have this idea that you throw people in prison, put people in prison as punishment, which is like, okay. I mean, how do you not see that? I mean, you see some of the things that people do, and you think, okay, that person needs to be first off just locked away. We need to be protected from that person, and
Right.
so okay, let's lock them away. But
Right.
it's almost like once we lock them away, then we say like, okay, phew, I feel safer now, or whatever it is, right? But look, but unless they're in for life, and unless life means life, that means they're going to get out. And if they're going to get out, then, and usually, if people are in long enough, they'll kind of age out, because at some point in time, people stop committing crimes, or at least they stop committing violent crimes. And so the vast majority of more violent crimes are committed by people under the age of 30. So the idea that then we feel better, okay, we put that person away, but they're going to get, they're probably going to get out. And then now you got to think, like, all right, what do we do now? Like, what did we do while they were away, wherever away is, to make it more likely that when they get out, they're not going to reoffend and then end up back where they were, right? And that's, of course, what we want. But you can't. How much money do you want to spend to ensure that, to increase the likelihood that people don't reoffend, right? So that's a question. It's like, well, we could spend gazillions of dollars and we could probably limit the likelihood to a great degree, and we could spend zero and we could increase the likelihood to a great degree. So somewhere you have to figure out how we're going to do that. And so anyway, when you say the resources, I'm thinking about, well, the resources are not just because they would be less bored if they have more books to read and that kind of thing. It's like, well, because they would feel they could develop a more grounded life. And so when they left prison, they would be much more likely to find a path in life that would not lead them to do the kinds of things that they did to get them in prison in the first place. And I think that's where we want to be. You would agree with that?
Yeah, no, for sure. It would be a more powerful, like, reentry program, if they were empowered in ways that when they re-enter into the world, they could thrive.
That's the thing. And one thing that people don't realize, if you've never worked in a prison or been in a prison, that prisons can be very boring places. Yeah, it can be very boring places. And so there's all the stories that we tell, and, like, the jokes people make and all that kind of stuff. And certainly bad things happen, but also it's a lot of time is spent where people are not, engaging their minds and preparing in ways that they need to prepare. So anyway, that's a thing. Yeah.
I'm, like, wanting to go back to all these articles that I read in the class. There was a bunch of readings on this woman named Angela Davis, or she was, I think she was, I can't remember how long she was in. She
wasn't
prison.
in very long, actually.
Oh, she wasn't? Okay.
No.
Yeah. So you know of her, and just
she
became a professor, and wrote several books, I think, and it was really cool to read some of her stuff.
Angela Davis has a very kind of very structural critique of power and race and gender and class, especially class. That's the thing is, so anyway, a lot of, but I think you would agree that, like, man, I listened to some of the men with whom who were students, right, were, man, just super insightful, and taking classes for them is really important and really grounding them, and definitely making it more likely that when they get out, because most of them are going to leave, that they will be really better positioned, I will
For
say.
sure. Yeah. And it was, man, they were in, it was so powerful. And the class on Tuesday was so powerful too, especially just the gratefulness and the just, I don't know, the love that they all shared for one another.
Yeah, they
Um,
really see themselves as on this journey together. We had a cool
yeah,
conversation,
yeah,
Elijah and I, with them, or they had a cool conversation about masculinity. You know, they asked one another. I mean, what was in the room was, okay, what is masculinity to you? And the conversation was so fascinating, man. God, just to be able to have a camera on that and just like the layers of thinking that the
and they're facilitating it, you know, and
and
that
they're
was
facilitating, yeah. Yeah. Wow, just so interesting, man. And being in there, right, with all these men, I mean, so many men and so many men who, you know, had very macho families or fathers
yep.
and yeah. Yeah, it's so
Mhm.
fascinating. And so many who didn't, man, who were like, you know, and who yeah, just so interesting. Wow.
Yeah,
It's just this is the
yeah,
problem, man. You know, the world I think this is what we're trying to demonstrate in Social 19. You know, if you just get a window into human beings, people are damn fascinating, man. Pretty cool.
and have so
So,
much to contribute and uh and just offer, yeah, offer to the world.
yeah. Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's what you want,
Yeah,
right? That's what we want always, man. That's the goal. Don't with prison, man. Whatever you got to do, just how much can we do? How much are we willing to spend to increase the likelihood that people will not reoffend once they leave?
right.
That's fundamental. You can never guarantee that. That's true, but there are so many things that we know are more likely to succeed than to fail. And they're not always very costly. And the cost of incarcerating a single individual is a lot of money. So, you know, there are just so many
Mm,
things that, you know, yeah, huh.
mhm.
I,
I'm trying to.
hang on, I had something here.
Sorry, I was looking up these articles. I was trying to.
I had something. Yeah. Hey, you know what? Check this out for next semester. Um, um, I had somebody named Karen reach out to me, and she said, "Have you ever thought about doing a class on the impact of being like what it's like to be a Karen in the world?
Uh,
How we've turned that name into something really negative?"
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so there's a Facebook group. There are different groups out there of Karens who get together and commiserate and have all sorts of really fascinating things. And there's the different Karens have started to say, like, this is really it's really difficult, man, and very nauseating to be a Karen. And like, you know, we just throw that word around, man. Like, don't be such a Karen. Or like, oh, fuck that Karen over there, you know, you know,
Wait,
annoying
so
Karens, you know. Yeah.
wait, and they get together and they talk about what
Yeah,
exactly?
they just are able to commiserate in a space, you know, an online space about like, yeah, it's just like because it's you know, it's not you know, at first it's funny, right? Like imagine
Right,
this, right?
right.
It's like at first it's funny. You're like, oh, okay, yeah. Okay. Oh, what's it like to be a Karen? Oh, you're a Karen. Like, oh yeah, okay. So, but that starts to go away pretty quickly, man.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so
Uh-huh.
she reached out and said, "Hey, you ever thought about doing a class on this?" And I'm like, I just did. As soon as I read the first line of your email, as soon as I read that question, I had a thought like, oh, this would be a cool class. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, yeah. So are you thinking about adding that in for next semester?
Yeah, well, I got to find someone. We got to make sure we have someone in class named Karen, first off. That'll be like the key. And this woman's like, yeah, I'll come in over Zoom. I'll talk, you know? I mean, again, like there's like she said, I can bring I think it's the president of this organization about Karens, you know, of the world. She'd say, I could probably bring her in, you know, I'm like, yeah, well, you'd be good enough. But isn't that wild? Like it's
Yeah.
so interesting. And it's not, you know, the idea isn't like, oh, how terrible it is to be me. It's not like that.
No,
It's just like, it's just fascinating. What is it to just be to be that, to be this
right,
person that people disparage in these
right.
horrible ways, man.
What's
I
the
mean,
like what's the role of that, and is there a parallel role throughout history that is a Karen? You
nah,
know?
well,
Or-
Adolf, you can't name him, you know, you can't. At some point in time, no one's gonna. Starting now, Karen is I'm sure very few people are naming their kid Karen these days, man.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
most popular names, it's that ceased to be a popular name.
Yeah, it's like
Adolf, nobody names their kid Adolf. Like, it's just you can't do that. Even that was a fairly common name in Germany, right? It's not at all uncommon. And but yeah, you
mhm.
know, I mean, I've known people named
Right.
Adolf, but they're all older, you know. So
But do you think like historically speaking, because like what is a Karen? Isn't a Karen like kind of like an how I know of it is like an agitator in social contexts and in some
no,
ways, or
someone who's a busybody agitator, right? But that only started to be used that way 10 to 15 years ago. I first probably heard the term commonly used like 10 years ago. So, you know,
Mhm,
really
okay.
has not gone back very.
Yeah.
in-
And so it would be like
It's
another
very not even maybe not even
it's-
10 years ago, honestly, for to you know when it really became super widespread. Um,
so this is a new thing, like within 10 to 15 years of like this
yeah, for
idea of
sure.
a Karen. There's no other like term that could be related to like a
No,
Karen
we didn't have
from
a term. No. It's a thing with these phones. Like, you know, people grab uh, people grab these videos. You know, we're able to videotape people's behaviors on our phones. And because we're able
Mm,
to videotape behavior, it's both the good and the bad. But, you know, when people are misbehaving, lots of people quickly pull out their phone more quickly than when people are doing something really super kind, you know, like
mhm,
soothing a young child who's crying in
mhm,
public. You know, people are less likely to pull their phone out than somebody castigating some young child who's crying in public, right? And then that person
right.
becomes a parent. So because of that, right, the Karen, this is gets them. Yeah, there's the point. Like Karen always gets some J. Karen always has a job as HOA president. That's the kind of thing. HOA president is the person who's like sticking their nose into everyone else's business and enforcing rules and telling people you can't do that. You can't park your car there.
Mhm.
You know, you can't do this.
Because they're seeing some type of injustice
Yeah,
in a
or
way,
they
or they
decided
think
that they're the enforcer of the rules or something. But it's always but it's
right.
seen as something that's someone who's really out of line and being annoying, right? And
Yeah.
then there's the haircut that goes along with it, short hair, like a bob, I don't know, whatever. It's like a sharp
S-
haircut,
s- So
you
you got to make
know.
sure you have that too when you do the class. It
Yeah, you
has to
got
be the whole
yeah,
bob.
yeah, yeah. Well, people aren't gonna if your name's Karen, trust me, you're not getting a haircut like that, man. That's not happening, you
Right,
know.
right.
I'm
But you
sure
just
of
have to
it.
get them to have the haircut for that specific
Yeah.
class.
Yeah, you go get your
Yeah.
haircut. But yeah, that's the thing, man. So I don't know. It's fascinating.
It's so fascinating, actually.
Yeah, because
Mhm.
again, I'm sure that people aren't sitting around going, "Oh, it's so terrible to be me." It's not that. It's just like, what would it be like? The Elijah suddenly Elijah becomes the name for every annoying, for the most annoying, pedantic men in the world. We call him, "Oh, you're an Elijah," and you're just like, you know, you go through the world. Yeah, my name's Elijah, but everybody knows now that Elijah is actually the name we use for the
Yeah,
most annoying, pedantic man that we see.
I'm already
And
feeling stereotype threat.
there you
Like
just,
it's
and we're gonna start
yeah,
it right here, actually.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
That is
Dark Wizard Prince says, "I love Karen videos." That's the point, man. Karen videos. It's like I'm sure on Reddit there's a subreddit that's just Karens. I don't know. Is there? What are the subreddits related to Karens? Hang on. Let's look.
It's the personification of female reactionary.
Yeah, no one names their kids Mao anymore.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
but your cat calls you that multiple times a day. I love that. That's great. Jeff, you missed that opportunity for a dad joke, man. Karens. There you go. Karens in the wild. Karen's gone wild. Karen's getting clapped. That only has 393 members. Karen's of TikTok, but here's Karen's. It has 68,000 members. Yeah. Here's like here it is. Public freak out. Right here's a Karen. Trash a shop for being refused a refund. Right here's one thing after another. So
Right.
anyway, yeah. Anyway, that's pretty wild, man.
Yeah, I wonder.
So that might be a class next semester. So we'll work on that. Okay.
Karen's was
Listen,
like
man.
one of the,
Go ahead, and then we'll.
No, I was just going to say that the customer's always right kind of thing.
Yeah.
It feels like that, but just blown up. Like out
That's
of
right.
proportion.
Karens are always right.
Right. Customer's right. What were you gonna say?
Yeah. And hey, listen, man, Alex Coleman. I gave this example, the shopping cart theory, right? Like returning the carts. It's such a tiny thing, but it's a good test of whether people self-govern. It's such a good test. Do you do that? Do you feel like you need to return the cart? It's such. It is. It is what it is, man, and probably isn't a better, more simple thing, right? I mean, there have been times. Well, I don't know that I've ever not returned a shopping cart, at least to the cart corral, but I don't know if I ever did. But I'm highly attuned to this kind of thing. But
and so,
go ahead, man.
If people aren't returning the shopping cart, they're saying that means what?
That they're just like, listen, I'm just going to live. I'm going to be in my own world. This is somebody else's job. It's not my job. I'm not thinking that, but I don't know. Why would somebody have the idea, not think that somehow I'm responsible for, I'm in a parking lot. I just put the cart next to my car. I load my groceries and I drive away. Well, somebody has to move. Other cars need to park there in that spot. It's going to be taking up space. So that means a car can't park. So somebody has to come out on a fairly regular basis. Someone's got to move the cart either to the cart corral or take it up to the store or whatever. So it's like, it's just a space where somebody has to step in to do something. And so some people would just say, well, that's what we pay people for. And somebody should pay someone to do that 24/7, like all the time, like every 10 minutes or so. Somebody from inside the store goes out to the parking lot and just
swoops. I've done that. That was
yeah, you did that, right? Okay. All right. Well, every 10 minutes?
It wasn't every 10 minutes. I don't think the manager wouldn't have. It was more so like every once in a while.
Every once in a while. Okay, well, there you go. And then so now you got all these carts. And so the easier thing is, look, everyone play a little bit of a role. Everyone just do it. When you pull your car in, see a cart in the cart corral, or if you happen to see a cart in the wild, so to speak, like they're just in the middle of the parking lot, just grab the cart and walk to the store with it. Use that as your cart. But the point being, you measure people's personality, like are they individualist oriented or community oriented, by like what they do with their carts. It's pretty simple, man. I mean, it's one measure,
That's amazing. That's so cool.
I would never, ever, ever leave my cart next to my car unless I was in a rush. Like, I don't know what the rush would be. I was like, I don't know, Lori fell and broke her arm. And I'm like,
right,
you get to the hospital, man. Like, let's go. And we just leave the cart there, run away. But,
same. Like, still, like, feel a form of shame if I don't return my cart. Like nothing crazy, but it's just like,
yeah. Yeah.
I'm leaving a little problem as I
Yeah.
go, you know?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah. I don't know. It's
that's
interesting,
so
but
interesting.
again, like in some cultures, that wouldn't even be a question. Like you would just get, you know,
Right, like
here
in Korea.
if
Right.
you just wouldn't not. You wouldn't do that. You just wouldn't do it, man. And that's all. You just the self pressure, man. Uh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's so yeah. I don't know,
So
man.
folks are back. We're gonna have a better delay. There was
No,
a
that's Ziesendorf said there's an
yeah,
empirical study of folks who back into their parking spot and how they're better at delayed gratification. Yeah. Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, get some Jay. I would feel the same way. I probably wouldn't if there were snakes there, but otherwise I would. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why that
Like,
is, man. I've been like that my whole life. I've been like not wanting to inconvenience other people, so I'll do whatever I need to do to
mm,
I'm just aware of that. This is kinda but you don't need to if everyone is just very individualistic, you just do what's best for you. If everybody's like that, then society can run very smoothly. Stores will know that, yeah, we got to send Elijah out into the parking lot every 15 minutes because everybody who took a cart out there just fucking left it in the middle of the parking lot. And so we know that and we
mm,
need to do that. And then
mhm,
we inch up, we just slowly push up the price of groceries so that we pay for Elijah to go walk around the the parking area, right? Parking lot and collect carts. And
right,
then all the individualist people, that's what they do. And no one gets mad and we all expect it. And it's good. It's fine. Everything runs very, very smoothly. But its
mhm,
problem is when we're in between. Some people feel like, yeah, I don't care. I would leave my cart there. And other people feel like, oh my God, I would never leave it there. That's when we get into the struggle.
right, right. That's so interesting, like, the different ways that, um, we adjust. So it's like you can either adjust to, like, the behaviors of the community, which is, like, either
Mhm.
individualistic, leaving their carts and adjusting to that, like,
Yeah.
creating a
Yeah.
role for someone,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
there's, like, I don't know, could they begin to ban the people that
Yeah.
leave
Yeah.
the cart and it makes people need to but like that would be harder to do, right? So you just create a role or I don't know, but that's the different ways in which either we adjust or we try to change the behavior. And so it's like we'd rather just adjust to it and try to change
Well,
it, right? Or and
yeah,
there's
I
I'm
don't
sure
know.
there's
It's
different cases
hard.
of that depending.
The crazy one is when people like we see this in my neighborhood sometimes because we have a grocery store that's about 4 blocks away. That people will take a cart from the parking lot and push their groceries home and then just leave it sitting on the sidewalk.
Seen
Now,
that so many times.
sometimes some of these people are international students or
Yeah.
international people, and then like they don't know because I've been to cultures where people do that. They like take carts and they push the cart down the street, and then someone comes and brings it back and that kind of thing. Like so you see that. Like, okay, so a little bit of that, um
Right.
but yeah, like it's crazy. I don't know. But again, if everyone's an individualist, it's fine. Works out well. Perfect. No one gets
That's cool.
pissed. Mm.
Yeah, yeah. But and you're saying if everybody was, but it's kind of like a
Yeah.
mix.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a common yeah, well, that's how life is always, right? That's
Right.
we kind of individualism is because then the other side is if everyone is very individualistic, well, then you're responsible for your happiness and you're responsible for all your issues. Like I don't have to worry about you because that's the
Mm,
culture we live in. So you take care
right,
of yourself. And
right.
then you're not asking for anything, right? Like, in an ideal, in a perfect individualist culture, you're not demanding anything of anybody else. You're not going to complain. You're not going to, you owe me this. Like, I don't owe you anything, man. Dude, you're responsible for
Mm,
you. I'm responsible for me. So get on with your life. And then people are more likely to not to follow that in different aspects of their lives. And so that's okay. That's cool.
Interesting. Yeah.
We don't have
Or-
any. So, imagine you don't have any kind of welfare system whatsoever, except for people who truly just accidentally fell on hard times,
Right.
or they were disabled or mentally or physically or something like that. But truly, like, there's nothing, man. And then you grow up seeing the impact. Like, for example, when I was a teenager, when I could have been like drinking a lot and doing a lot of drugs, and a lot of my friends were getting into coke and
Mhm.
acid and stuff on a more regular basis. But I looked at people who were 2 and 3 years older than me, and I'm like, oh man, I see what those guys. Shit, I see what you're doing, man.
Mhm.
You're pumping gas at the gas station, which is perfectly fine. And then at night and on the weekends, you're just hanging out at the local quarry in your
Right.
swimming suit, drinking beer, man, and partying. Like, that's it. And then I'm looking at people who are 5 years older than that, and I'm like, dude, I'm seeing that I don't want to
Mhm.
go there. So, if you live in a world like that, and everyone just has to, from a young age, go like, I better just take care of me, man. I can't
Mm.
anybody else. But
Mhm.
the problem is when we live in the kind of the middle of these worlds, and then it becomes more difficult.
Right. It makes it harder to create like steady norms or standards on certain
Mm,
on certain things
yeah.
because of the
Yeah.
different
Mhm.
worldviews at which they want to approach like problems.
Yeah. Like I'll take responsibility here, but I want help over there, or whatever the case is. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, okay, but it's not going to work. You know.
Mhm.
So that's where, yeah.
It's
Yeah,
so
I
interesting.
was yeah, get some Jay. I did see things at a really young age. I saw things. And strangely, I don't know how, man. I have no idea how I saw certain things, but I was like, yeah, I don't want.
And yeah, to know that, like to see the people that were 5 years older and be like, I think I know where I should be going instead of over here. Like not everybody is.
Yeah. And there were other people who were 5 years older, and they were in the trades. I mean, they were working at the Jeep factory, or, they were, I had a buddy who I knew. He was working for he was learning to be an electrician, so like I saw that, and I'm like, okay, you're moving along. That's cool. It wasn't like they were working 9 to 5 kind of stuff. Well, not the Jeep people. People always had that. And the youngest people had the overnight shifts and stuff, right?
Right.
But uh but yeah, I saw that. That was fine. That's great. It's people that were just not being really serious, and they just really just wanted to party, man. They just got out of school somehow. They barely squeaked through, and they just wanted to party. I'm like, that's cool for a while. It's great, but after a certain point, uh, yeah. It's
It's
also I
what I
didn't
would
have a family to take care of me, so I knew. I mean, I wasn't gonna be taken care of
Right.
financially, that kind of thing. So
You felt that, right?
yeah, yeah, you have that. All right, listen, man. Why don't we roll out and and yeah, why don't we roll out, man? Maybe we'll hop back on another time in the next few days or whatever. How long? When are you leaving? Are you leaving town? And if so,
I'll
when?
probably leave on Monday
All
is when
right,
I'll go.
all right. We'll hop on at some point. See
Okay.
how things are rolling. All right, man. Jeff.
Works out.
Uh, everybody. All right, man. We're gonna head out.
Merry, happy holidays.